Hi everyone, and welcome to the Jyske Bank Auditorium and to your first session of Aarhus Symposium 2017. I hope you're as excited as I am to witness some of the most influential and inspiring business leaders of our time. Today's sessions will consist of a 20-minute presentation by the speakers, followed by 40 minutes of Q&A. I hope you'll take this opportunity to engage with the speakers and ask questions, whether regarding their presentations or this year's theme, Leading Through Change. You can ask questions in two ways, either simply by raising your hand or through a Q&A tool, Slido. You can submit your questions to Slido as you think of them during this session, and the instructions on how to do so can be found on the screen behind me. Furthermore, when enjoying your breaks throughout the day, you'll have the opportunity to chat with some of the speakers over a cup of coffee in the Jyske Bank Lounge just outside in the M building. And finally, I hope you'll consider participating in our two running competitions throughout the day. The best questions submitted to Slido will be rewarded with a prize, as will the best photo uploaded to Instagram using the hashtag ASYMP2017. Now, with the practicalities in order, I would like to welcome the moderator of this first session. We had the great pleasure of working with her in 2015, and I'm more than happy to have her back here today. So, please join me in welcoming Director of Communications at Finans Denmark, Nina Munk-Pine.
Thank you, and it's great to be back and also to see that the sound is okay, but it's nodding up there, so that's great. So I was also here in 12 and 13 and 14 and 15, and and I must say it's always a pleasure coming back here and participating in Aarhus Symposium because I know it's a student-driven event. I've been moderating a lot of events in my career, and you guys always impresses me, also with your curiosity and ability to ask great questions. So again, I look forward to giving your questions on to today's first speaker here at the New Technologies track, which is the CEO of Nets, Bo Nilsson. And I guess, as you know, Nets is in Denmark, mainly known for Dankortet, also, of course, for other payment solutions. And right now, they are also the current developer of our electronic identification system called NemID. So a big player within new technology and financial sector in Denmark. So Nets is right now a listed company. They went public in 2016, which is a little over a year ago. And 2 months ago, a new private equity firm then made an offer for the firm, so now they're probably going to be unlisted again. But during all these changes, it has been the same CEO, Bo Nilsson, who came in 2013 as the CFO. And then he became the CEO after the banks sold off Nets to two private equity companies that then listed the company. So a lot of changes within Nets, also being in a very changing business. Bo Nilsson himself, educated from CBS in Copenhagen, but then spent most of his time in other countries than Denmark. He was in London, spent many years in Portugal, and then returning to Denmark in 2012. And then coming to Nets in 2013. I know that he has 4 daughters, and maybe that is some of the answers to the questions on how he himself keeps track on new technologies, not only what's going on, but also the pace with which things are changing. I don't know, maybe we can ask him about it, but please help me welcome Mr. Bo Nilsson.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Aarhus Symposium for inviting me here today. I must say, this is my first time here. I am extremely impressed with the organization, with the way that things are managed, and also by the number of attendees. And on that front, I'd like to thank you all for coming here to listen to me talking about how I view the future of leadership through change. And in a way, I'm quite honored that you are here because I saw that there were competing slots in other areas of the building with other speakers. I'm happy that you chose to come here and listen to me. I think I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we have done at NETS, but the most of my presentation will be about what we're going to do to prepare for the future. But the backdrop is extremely exciting. We're seeing how technology is basically exponentially changing the world. And one of the areas that technology is definitely involved in pushing exponentially is the digitization of societies. And that is happening on a global scale. I think in terms of the global market, there is no doubt that the future person coming out of school, business school or university, has to think bigger and have to think globally. So that is definitely one of the things that I believe is a takeaway from today, and I'll try to explain how that works. But I will say that, you know, we are very, very lucky, all of you in this room and me, for really living in some of the most digitized societies in the world. And when we look at OECD studies, I think the countries that we're in 7 countries, 4 of them are the top 5 most digitized societies in the world. That digitization is something that is inherent in who we are and what we do as societies. We have tech-savvy consumers. We have governments that are inclined to make society more efficient. We have corporates and banks really pushing for digitization, for efficiency, and for ways to serve their end customers in a better way. So this is a very, very fortunate situation for us to be in, that we're here, and we're part of that. And I believe that if we behave well, and if we do a good job, I think we can take the experiences of technology and digitalization from the Nordic societies, of course also from the Danish, to explore other market opportunities around the world, and I'll also talk about that. When it comes to the payment industry, we are also some of the most digitized societies in the world. Here in the Nordics, more than 70% of all payment transactions are digital. Just to give you an example, if you just look south to Germany, that's less than half, so less than 35% of all transactions are digital there. So that gives you an idea that even in the payment business, we're very, very progressed in these societies. And what is happening around the world, clearly, is that the world is becoming a smaller place. And so even though that we are very digital here, that doesn't protect us from other entry players to come to our market. Because with the tech-savvy consumer structure that we have, of course, also Danes and Swedes and Finns and Norwegians are more inclined to test these technologies. And so we are also, in a way, being used as a testing ground for future technology, which is both an opportunity, but obviously also somewhat of a risk. I think I want to talk a little bit about NETS. I'm not allowed to talk too much about us, but just to take you through basically what we do, is we are really at the center of daily life in the Nordics. Picture yourself going into a coffee shop, and you want to pay with a digital payment, so not with cash. We don't do cash. We only do digital payments. If you want to pay with your credit card, with your DAN card, with contactless, if you want to pay with a mobile phone, if it's Apple Pay or Mobile Pay or the mobile DAN card, any way that you make a digital payment in store, those transactions will go through us one way or the other. If you go online to buy something, buying a flight to go on holiday, you typically use either your mobile phone or your card to pay. All those transactions also, one way or the other, go through our network. If you transfer money between each other on mobile pay or other ways, those transactions also go through us. If you want to pay a bill, a recurring bill from a utility or telecom operator or something, those transactions also will go through us. If you want to access in a secure way, your mobile bank or your online bank, you will use our e-security franchises to access those services in a secure way. If you want to interact with governments, with tax authorities, you will use eBox, also a service that we own. So this gives you a little bit of an idea about, what we actually do, told in a very, very simple way. Okay, there we go. Oh, there we go. So not only are we doing a lot of things across all types of payments, but we are also the market leader in our region. So we are by far the number one in all the countries that we're operating in. And we're a very big player also internationally. We are the third largest payment operator in Europe. Of course, we'd like to be the largest, but we are the third largest. We have basically a network effect in many ways, because if you look around the Nordics, we have around 250 banks as our customers. That's basically every bank in the region. We have 300,000 merchants. That's also a large proportion of merchants in the Nordics. We have 30,000 online merchants. We are obviously hooked up to all the households, all the shops, but also to national banks. And we have really, therefore, a central role in how payment transactions are done. And for that reason, we process more than 7.7 billion transactions every year, and the value of those transactions is almost 500 billion Danish kroner. So obviously, a lot of activity. We have revenue around 8 billion Danish, which is about €1 billion, and we're growing fast in all of our countries. We have a really attractive business because there is structural growth underlying in everything that we do. So we have underlying growth, but we've also taken market share. Amongst other things, here we can see Sweden grew almost 60% last year, so we've also taken market share in some of our markets. I want to talk a little bit about the industry and what's happening. And if you look here, there is definitely a change of roles. When you look at the retailers, we're definitely seeing that retailers are also taking a position and a very big interest in the payment industry. Why is that? Because payments is obviously very, very important to retailers. It is their revenue, and they want to make sure that they can effectuate payments in a very consumer-friendly way, a cheap way, and an efficient way. So they are definitely entering into edges of the payment business, and that is obviously our customers that also to some extent will become partners, or even at the extreme competitors. So there's definitely a change of roles from that perspective. We're seeing consumers, I mentioned that already, we're seeing consumers really driving change. Of course, the adoption of mobile pay is a good example. We have also contactless, for example, that has been really an exponentially growing area of our business. 40% of all transactions today on the Dan card is done contactless. That was 0 2 years ago. So clearly there is exponential development driven by consumers' need to do things faster and cheaper and better. But also in the other markets, we have Vipps in Norway. It's the similar service to mobile pay here in Denmark. We have Swish in Sweden. We have Siirto in Finland. So this is not, mobile pay is not only something particular to Denmark. There are services like that appearing in all of our markets. So a very exciting new development. Technology is obviously changing. If we look at technology, years ago, there were very few exponential technologies in reality. But today, there are a number of exponential technologies. Machine learning, algorithms, all sorts of artificial intelligence is all exponential technologies. And those technologies are something that we use actively in everything that we do. At the end, we have also third parties coming in. Now Apple Pay is in Denmark, launching also in Sweden and in Finland. We're seeing Samsung Pay. We know Google is playing with payments. So clearly new entrants coming in is also complicating the market. And what does that mean, all of it? It really means that there is increasing competition. There are many, many players coming in, not only the traditional players like Visa and MasterCard, or the banks, or our industry peers, but there are also fintech companies that are entering our market. And we definitely need to stay alert to that change in that environment. And I think that importantly, I want to mention that with exponential technology, what is really, really small today, and something that we may say, oh, well, we ignore that, and suddenly it goes onto an exponential curve with a network effect. These developments can really accelerate out there. So we need to stay very alert to new solutions and new ways of doing payments in the future, because technology can lift services that are really insignificant now, maybe 2 years from now, to be very significant. And those changes are very different from what we've seen historically with political change, business change, social change has really been more linear. Now we're looking at exponential change. And now what are we doing about that? Well, first of all, I think that another big learning point, I think, for you is to say, should we just try to ignore technology, exponential development? No, it's impossible. Because if we don't do it, somebody else will. So I think this thing about embracing technology is something that is definitely a key learning point, I think, for you. Throw yourself into the technology game. Become tech savvy. Even if you're a business student, experiment with technology, learn about technology. And that's what we do internally at Nets. So we're experimenting with blockchain, data analytics, tokenization, and looking at different ways to do mobile payments, to cooperate with different fintechs. And we're doing all of that really to make sure that we're leader today, but in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we will still be leaders. And the philosophy is really quite simple. Today, we have the existing business, the core of our operations today. And of course, business units, technology groups, customer services, all of our existing operations, they need to continue to develop our products. That's obvious. That is done in every company, and we need to continue to do that. Good example of that, of course, is our clearing business, which clears transactions between banks. We're now launching that in other markets, Italy, Slovenia, and other places where we want the domestic clearing. That's kind of the core expanding that we need to do. But we also need to explore on the edges of our business, what additional areas can we go into, and how can we explore those areas? That's basically incremental development. But I think that today we also need to do something more dramatic, more transformational, basically trying to find technology breakthroughs, new ways of applying payments in the market, new sources of volumes, and new ways to capture value in the payment space. And we have decided, most recently, to create an innovative unit in our company. We call it Smart Payments. And what we have done is that we've taken a group of people, put them in a completely different office, and told them that you need to focus only on transformational developments. Don't focus on the core, don't focus on the incremental, focus on the moonshots, the big new things in the market. And look not two quarters out, or 1 year out, or 2 years out, look 10 years out. And basically, every single thing has to be turned to figure out how do we position ourselves for that development, even if it is about disrupting ourselves. So even if there's a big solution that we believe is groundbreaking, that will basically dilute our own company, we will have to do that, because if we don't do it, somebody else will. And we've basically set up a focus group of people that are completely different than the people we've had working for us in the past. So we have 30 full-time employees. These people have different backgrounds than people working at Nets on the core. And we also experiment with having students. We have 12 different nationalities. We hired people from all over the world. And most of the people here have been at the company for less than 2 years. And the average age of these people is the 20s, not the 40s or the 50s. We are basically saying we need capabilities to be able to explore all sorts of different trends, whether it's consumer trends, social trends, behavioral trends, network effects, technology platforms, capability development, all these things that we need to really figure out what the future of payment look like, we will have to do here. And we've had a great start. We have produced many POCs. We've really helped not only the business, but also coming up with new ways, and I will come back and talk about an example of that. Now, even if you say you have to open up and pursue and follow every single opportunity that could bring you into the future, we still need to focus in a bit. So in smart payments, we've said there are 4 things that we need to get control over and that we need to understand where it's heading. And here are the 4 areas. So IoT, Internet of Things. I mean, 10 years from now, I think that there will be few of you who will be driving your own car. And definitely, how can payments play a role in driverless vehicles? And that's just one of the examples of what IoT can bring. Biometrics, clearly, contactless is very easy, but you still need a code. On the internet, fraud is rising. How can we create solutions that will make payments a lot more secure and a lot more stable? And how can we use biometrics to evolve that? Blockchain, how can we use different types of technologies than ones we're using today to create new user experiences and new connection and new network effects? And blockchain is definitely a very interesting future. Payment bots, for example, why should you always tap in your card? Why can't you talk to the mobile or talk to a bot that will basically do all the payments for you? So we're experimenting with different user experiences to really cover all the basics. And we're using that through R&D on the underlying technologies that enables these types of new areas. We're also focusing a lot on partnership. I think it's clear that in the future, we can't do everything ourselves. We have 2,500 people, of course, working at our firm, but we have another 5,000 people that we interact with through partnerships and suppliers. And so we're really against the Nordic payment business. We're really, a lot more people around that. And we use crowdsourcing, and we use sourcing in general, to really find how to leverage the technology that we already have and the product position that we already have. And when we look at the Nordics, there's actually a pretty good startup community in the Nordics within payments. And here we see that we have, almost 45 new startups that has come to market recently in our space. And working with those and enabling those companies in partnerships to access our networks is clearly a priority that we have. So really, what is the ambition of smart payments? Well, the ambition is that we need a setup where we can create the new revenue of the future for Nets. And what we have set ourselves, an ambition is to say that we want 1 billion Danish kroner of revenue in 5 years. And that's from 0 today. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're basically going to try to find areas that can be huge. And instead of thinking about small incremental stuff, we've got to think big. And one of the areas that we have exploited that we believe can be the next frontier of payments is clearly social media. Today, we transfer money between us through an account-to-account transaction, either the mobile bank or through mobile pay. But the user experience is on the mobile. We believe that with certain social media and chats, Messenger, and other WhatsApp and so on, if we could build payment functionality into those types of exchanges so that when you chat with a friend on Messenger, that you can send each other money right there and then as you are planning to meet for dinner or you owe somebody some money and so on. So the social media interaction that is huge in terms of our way of living, clearly payments will also be an integral part of that, and we're exploring that quite a bit. So I'd finish by saying that for me, when you think about how to go about developing yourself, and that could be at Nets or it could be, of course, many other places. I think this thing about focusing in on consumers and user experience is very critical. Focusing in on network effects. Really, how can networks roll out in an exponential way through partnership most of the time? How can we reach as many people as possible through network effects? How can we basically use exponential technology to develop the product in an exponential way and reach as many consumers as possible? How can we basically make sure that we have the right capabilities at the company where you work to really approach up towards that challenge? And I can say that, as I mentioned, we have 2,500 people working for Nets. But the 3 years where I've been CEO, we have half of them are new. So over the last 3 years, we've hired more than 1,000 people. Of course, there are also people who had to leave us. But it's all about trying to set up the operation such that you have the right capabilities for the challenge for the future. And I basically say, if you want to work any place at the forefront of technology, I'm very hopeful that you will send us an application and hopefully be one of the 1,000 people we may hire in the next 3 years. Thank you so much for listening.
So I'll just turn on my sound as well. There it was. It's a fantastic business that you are in, Bo, and so many questions also from you guys. So just one little thing on being the third largest player in Europe, saying, of course we want to be the largest. Is that an ambition? Is that like one of the goals that also your new owners would like you to pursue?
Well, I mean, it's, I used to try to say is that why is it with the kind of technology that we have available to us and the society that we live in here in the Nordics, why is it that most of the big tech startups are coming from Silicon Valley? There's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't come from Ballerup, where we have our headquarters. And so clearly, we have no impediments to be a global player. And I will mention one example, is that our real-time clearing platform, the clearing platform that makes mobile pay possible and makes the Dankort possible in real time, is obviously something that we have also sold to other markets. We have sold it to Italy, amongst other places. And in Italy, we're basically clearing transactions between two different banks and bank accounts in 0.4 seconds. We're clearing that transaction in 0.4 seconds from a data center in Norway, and the technology that was developed here in Denmark. So it gives you an idea that if you can have a data center in Norway and you can do transactions in less than 1 second in a market that is 2,500, 3,000 kilometers away, think about the opportunities that creates.
But there are reasons why Silicon Valley is the tech valley of the world, and one of the reasons, of course, is also knowledge and human the human capital that you can gather in one area. Can Nets remain in Denmark and headquartered in Denmark and still carry out the ambitions being one of the largest players in the world on this area?
I think that I believe personally that we only have two impediments, and this is not a political speech or a religious speech, but we have only two impediments. One is the weather, unfortunately,
yeah,
and I guess we can't do anything about that.
So
I don't. Well, exactly.
You missed that.
Well, so one is the weather. We can't do anything about that. And then also there is a perception of high taxes. But I was actually at a dinner. Brian Mikkelsen, the Minister of Business Affairs, visited last week. I'm in his advisory committee. Visited Nets last week, and he's now working hard to extend the tax benefit for foreigners to come to Denmark to work from the 5 years that is right now to 7 years. And I think that things like that is incredibly important for us. But it is true that Could there be other places to place a headquarter? Maybe. But I don't think that we have impediments. We have people coming in from Silicon Valley working for us, from India, from Pakistan, Indonesia, Africa, other European countries coming to Denmark to work for us. So we feel that we can solve for that and still stay here.
And still stay here. We will see. So a lot of the questions coming in from you guys is about, of course, new technologies, which this is about, and not at least blockchain, and also, of course, artificial intelligence. Bo, how is Nets? How do you deal with the? Let's start with the blockchain first. How do you view upon that? Is it a game changer? Have it peaked yet, or where are we on the curve?
I think that this is one of those types of things that I consider to be a potential exponential technology. And I think if you don't embrace it, you'll definitely, potentially, I'd say, be a loser in the market. And so what we're doing in our lab is that we're experimenting with the blockchain technology. But more importantly, we're actually doing POCs with external companies. We're doing it with banks. We're doing it with central banks. But we're also doing it with governmental institutions. And for example, we have one POC that we're running with the Internal Revenue, so SCAT, to take some of their workflows and putting them on the chain. And there are some really significant breakthroughs in terms of efficiency of running some of their internal processes with blockchain technology. So I think that this is just, it's early days, but blockchain is part of our future, there's no doubt.
No doubt. And so how do you deal with that inside Nets? Like blockchain, is that in the smart payments department?
It is in smart payments,
yeah?
Yes, it is.
And play around with it?
Yes, and they are. This is, the offices of smart payments is not looking like the offices of Nets. They have their own robot that does all sorts of stuff.
Makes coffee and things like that?
It can get coffee. It doesn't do the coffee. It can get the coffee.
It can get okay.
So I think that what we're basically saying is that let's make some POCs. Let's experiment. Let's exchange views with potential users, and so that we're not sitting in the sandbox doing all sorts of interesting things with blockchain and hoping that whatever comes out could be used. We're out there working with our customers, and that's what we call co-creation. And co-creation, I think, is something of the future, because I don't think anyone alone can sit and develop these types of technologies successfully.
And what about AE?
Yeah.
Is that in this?
We are using it. Yes and no, because we use artificial intelligence in, for example, our fraud business, which is part of the core. And fraud prevention is basically a service that we sell to banks to identify card fraud. And we manage 36 million credit and debit cards in the Nordics. So we're by far the market leader. I think the next one has like 3 million or something. So we know a lot more about behaviors in terms of card usage than anyone else in the Nordics. And what we do is we have neural networks that uses artificial intelligence to be able to predict fraud. So instead of handling fraud after it happened, it will either be identified at the time of payment, so the payment doesn't go through, or in fact even trying to predict fraud before. And it is incredible how smart these computers can get when they have the access to so much information. And we are actually halved the fraud losses from banks in the last year using this new technology. But that is a good example of applying artificial intelligence in the core. But we're obviously also exploring how can we use that in smart payments to other things. And one of the things we are working with is data. Artificial intelligence is, of course, a fantastic way to analyze huge amounts of data. And the idea, for example, is that for our merchants, for example, having access to an app where they can basically follow their transactions in store real time, as well as predict sales based on weather, based on customers actually shopping nearby. There are all sorts of ways that data and artificial intelligence can be better at predicting sales, as well as making it easier for merchants to manage their resources. For example, it doesn't make sense to have 6 people in the shop when all statistics will, with 99% probability, would say that no customers will arrive. So things like that to add value to customers we're experimenting with.
Yeah. And we have a real-time question.
Those have preference, right?
We have a microphone coming in. I think that those should be prioritized so that we just, this is the new technologies.
My name is Adam, and I'm a student of political science. Mm-hmm. So my question is, which challenges could nets be facing in the future if the technology evolves faster than the necessary supportive law for actually using or developing this kind of technology?
Yeah.
The regulation part, yeah.
That's a very good question. I mean, there's obviously the short answer, and then there's a little bit. I'll try to give a little bit more color. I mean, if you go to Silicon Valley, I'm in Silicon Valley all the time because we have partners over there. We are part of Plug and Play, Singularity University, and all these
And it wouldn't be easier living there?
I mean, not now. There's a long flight from San Francisco to Ballerup. And I have to go to Ballerup, so I guess not. But anyway, I am there quite a bit. And basically, if you ask a startup in Silicon Valley, so what are you going to do about regulation? And because no, that's not important. We're doing all this fantastic stuff, and then we'll look at regulations later. I think that's a wrong approach. At the same time, if you start with, oh no, there's a lot of regulation, and so we can't do anything, that's also not the right way to do it. I think it is that fine kind of balance between working exponentially, but at all times trying to stay true to your core DNA. And our core DNA is that we need to have payments that are stable, secure, and cheap, and efficient. So if we stay, and stable and secure, it has a lot to do with regulation. So there has to be some sort of sounding board in terms of the regulation already in place. Then you say, what happens if exponential technology takes off and regulation can't follow? Well, I think that that's likely to happen. The laws around data usage and many other things are actually kind of in that arena. But I will say that the Nordic governments are very pro-digitization and technology. Uber, I guess, is an exception. I don't understand that, I have to say. But anyway, well, but there is definitely an attempt by both European politicians, but also domestic politicians here in the Nordics, to make sure that there has to be regulation. We are regulated. We're also Dankort is regulated, but that we allow certain parameters where we can operate freely within. And I think that I'm confident that in the Nordics that will be okay. But I think if you go to Italy or Spain or other places, it may not be. And clearly, keeping an eye on that, I think, is for us critically important, because if you get on the wrong side of regulation, that's not a good place to be.
But if we continue in that line of thought, what about the consumer protection part of it? That's why we do regulation. And you say, as we mentioned, the big data, that's how you're going to build the artificial intelligence on, et cetera, et cetera. Where are the consumer protection within your business? How much do you think about that?
We think a lot about it. For example, when Apple Pay comes to Denmark, and you're almost auto-enrolled as an Apple phone holder into Apple Pay, that's not really a very consumer-friendly way of behaving. That's not good. That's not acceptable.
Do you think that people enrolling in Apple Payment knows that
no.
where the data goes?
They have no idea. They have no idea. But so that's not okay. And so, for example, Margrethe Vestager is here, somewhere in the building.
Yeah, not in here right now.
No, but she has big cases against Apple, right? She has big cases against Visa. There has to be rules. I mean, we need to maybe be able to protect consumers, protect corporates, protect banks. And we have that in our DNA because of our history. We have 50 years of compliance with regulation. It's not to say that we don't have discussions with politicians, but we operate within the rules. But there are certain other examples that are coming out that where that is not the case.
But you would like to own data as well, because then you can have the big data, and you can build the artificial intelligence on it, and you can provide better solutions for your customers, etc.
I have a business idea that if anyone out there can figure this one out, then there is a lot. I mean, that's a global business, and it's huge. And that is that what is the value that you are giving away when you, without looking at terms, for example on Apple phones when you update iOS, what is the value that you're giving away from you to others that you should be paid for? That is the question. Then the answer is, of course, gazillions. And then the next, and that's where you're going to make the money, the next phase, is where you're then saying, well, we will price that. So before you take on anything, here is an app where you can go and you can offer Apple that information, but they have to pay X. That, if somebody makes that, they will make gazillions. Because clearly that is definitely, so answered in another way, we would like to use data when it's beneficial to our customers. There has to be a value. Fraud is a big value to you, right? Because most of the fraud, a lot of the fraud, you don't even notice, right? It's not your problem. You can ask from the bank for the money, but if you don't ask them for the money, you take the risk of the fraud. So you are taking risk on fraud. So if we can tell you we can avoid that cost, to completely avoid it, that's a value to you. And then you're giving data away to allow that. But that's a specific use of data. So I think staying true to our customers or their customers and not behaving in an irresponsible way, using data that in a way that we shouldn't, is something that we are very, very careful about.
But are all companies that? It's
No.
And where does that leave the consumers, and can you see any business models within that? Because that's going to be huge, and also crossing in on cybersecurity, that you don't know where your data is going.
I think that the issue is that people think that data is worth something. Data is not worth anything. And nobody has ever been able to actually capitalize and selling data. But what they have been able to sell what the data shows. So what is the analysis of the data? That is where the money is. So that's why Google makes so much money, right? They're basically taking your data and then they're selling it to advertisers. That's easy. And I'm just saying that consumers at some point will come to a point where they say, this is enough. And there can be regulation, clearly, and there will be. But there is also somewhere consumer will say, okay, no, that's enough. We want part of the pie.
And then they should charge money for giving data, is that it? Yeah, and then,
Why not? That's a business idea. Somebody makes that, I like to finance it.
You can call
from my own money. Sorry.
And then talking more about the cybersecurity, where do you see that moving, also with the new technologies? And we know, I mean, everything, also with talking about maybe not cashless, but less cash society, that all transactions are moving online. And that's where we see the fraud going on, and not just your account being hacked, but you being tricked into sending money weird places, or CEO fraud. I'm sure that you've experienced it as well. Yeah. How big a threat is it in your?
My CFO, he gets emails from me every day asking for money.
Okay.
I mean, he would never send any money to me, so that's the good news, right? But it is, I think, the fraudsters are also using exponential technology. And the crime of the future is completely different from the crime of today. I mean, today, if you're a thief, you go to a house, you steal, you have to carry most things on the way out. How many houses can you do in a night? 3, 4 houses? That's not exponential. But if you're on the internet, you can hack hundreds of thousands of houses to steal in one night. So the future crime will be completely different than it is today. And we are seeing increase in cybercrime, exponential increase. Now, we are also using artificial intelligence to prevent it. So this will become a big, who has the biggest machines?
Yeah, it's a race, right?
It's a race.
And you can't
And we have the
win
biggest
it.
machines.
Yeah, right now.
So far. We do. And we will continue to need to invest, and we're investing hundreds of millions to continue that kind of warfare.
Yeah.
And we have to win it. We cannot lose that fight.
And I guess there's also a kind of education from the consumer side involved in this.
We have,
That you have to take on as
security is our number one priority. I always hate to mention it, but we had one of the most unfortunate experiences of all times. And there's nobody at Nets that will ever forget that.
And
that was, of course, when this gentleman at IBM stole some data from our systems and sold it to journalists to locate celebrities.
The Se og Hør-sagen.
The Se og Hør-sagen.
Yeah.
Now, that taught you that you can never be too careful about data. So for us, data security is the most important of all. If we can't keep people's identities, information, money safe, we can't. Why are we here? So we have invested a lot, and we're throwing the kitchen sink at cybercrime.
So many of you want to ask about bitcoins.
There
Are
are
you
actually
changing
some
subjects, or is it it's a follow-up? Yeah.
I can repeat the question if it is. Yeah. Okay.
Hello. Okay, so my question is regarding social media transactions, as you were talking about. How do you prevent those transaction data from going to Silicon Valley and being used for some other purpose?
Well, every payment transaction have to happen in a different universe than the underlying information going between two Facebook users. And so we have set up these safe environments inside of these operations. And interestingly enough, and this is quite interesting, also a little bit scary, but fraud on, if you send money through us one day, not today, we have to have the banks and all these other people on board, of course, but if one day you send money to the lady sitting next to you over Messenger, for example, actually that transaction is more safe than if you take your credit card details and punch them in on a e-commerce site that could be Chinese. A lot safer. Why? Because we know that it's the two of you chatting. We can, with 99.99% probability, know that it's the two of you who are doing it. We cannot know the site of the Chinese merchant or a fraudster. So these types of transactions are actually safer than the transactions we're doing today. And that is, of course, also a massive breakthrough. So I don't know if that answered your question. Yeah.
It does.
There was one question there.
Hi. You talked a lot about innovation in the beginning, and now you're talking about a lot about security. But I'm wondering, from a management perspective, how do you manage the trade-off between them? Because it's important for you to grow, but it's also the most important thing is also the security. So how do you manage that trade-off between?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So basically, what we try to do is when we work a lot with project groups. And we try to accelerate through the first phase of innovation, through the funnel, in getting things to POCs, without the involvement of security. But once we get to go-to-market models and interfaces, then we get the security people involved. Not too late, but also not too early. And that's a fine balance, because security people can destroy any type of innovation, right? I mean, I hope there are none here, but and that's their job. Risk management does the same in finance and management and internal audit and all these people that I interact with, and they are hired, and we have to respect that, to protect us against our own creativity and craziness. I think that so far we have done a good job in not killing projects because of security in the beginning, but then had an early and timely reality check.
Yeah. So a lot of you want to ask about bitcoins, the crypto currency that are being dealt a lot of places in the world, and of course that's not it's not like a transfer that you would use on mobile pay, but what maybe it will come. A lot of I think a lot like traditional bankers around the world have said that they don't want to touch it with. If they were being paid millions of it, they don't want anything to do with it. But what's your thoughts on Bitcoin? And
well, my thought is that I saw this morning that Lars, one of my friends, he made gazillions on buying Bitcoin and selling them again. So that's interesting.
I'm sure
and I think that is the root of the problem. And I tell you, I think that's the root of the problem. I think that Bitcoin is fantastic. It's incredible, right? And it's blockchain technology. It's actually more secure than what people give it credit for, if it's done in the right way.
So when you say secure, what do you mean?
Meaning that the transaction between two people is verified with machine learning, computers in
the value of the currency is different. Yeah.
But the problem is the value of the currency. I mean, if one corner is not one corner, but one corner becomes 2 kroner in a transaction overnight, then that's not really a payment method that you can use. There has to be some sort of constant. And so I think Bitcoin's problem is that it never really became that big. And so now it becomes more for speculators. And so I think that Bitcoin, will have a lot of trouble because of that. So it kind of the genius of the coin, it has been destroyed by the lack of network effects that has never happened. And now it's becoming marginal, and there is a lot of speculation for and against the Bitcoin, which is, so I think it's kind of played out.
But what about the whole thought behind Bitcoin?
The
fact
thought
that
is
some
brilliant.
people somewhere figure out, hey, let's make our own currency.
And Lars, Rode, he is here in the house. I talked to him earlier.
Everybody's in the house.
The head of the head of the National Bank, and I had lunch with him, I think about a year and a half ago, where one of his stories to me was that they had closed the printer of notes in the basement. So they're no longer printing $100 kroner notes or any other notes. Why? It's because people don't use them, and when you use them less, they will last longer. So that just tells you, that's pretty interesting, right? That in Norway, it's almost 100% of all transactions now that are done digital. There is no cash around. So this is what's going to happen to us too, of course.
And how long will that take before we are completely cashless?
In Denmark, it's going to take another 5, 6, 7. We're a little slower in Denmark. I don't know why. We like maybe the Danske kroner.
Compared to Norway.
Compared to Norway, yeah.
In other countries we are.
No. Compared to Germany, it's going to take never.
Yeah,
probably. They love it. There's still people in Germany that has Deutschmarks under their pillow, right? I don't know what's going on there, but it's historic, of course. But anyway, so I think that the first part of it is clearly that, but central banks will one day have a virtual kroner, right? And because it's a lot more efficient for them probably to run their own systems in terms of FX trading and all sorts of other things. So one day we will have a new Danish kroner. It will be more or less the same, but it will be a blockchain Danish kroner. There's no doubt.
And how many years did you say? 5? Did I hear you say that?
I think in 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So we have questions from the audience. Now the microphone is running away.
It disappeared.
Yeah, up there. Great. And then,
Is it working?
yeah.
Great. Yeah, so talking about cashless payments and data and all that got me thinking about receipts.
Yeah.
So for me, at least, it seems obvious that the future will also be receiptless, at least in physical form or paper form. And it seems as a huge opportunity for you to get all that data, because obviously, if you knew what all your customers were buying, not only how much they paid for it, but also what they actually bought, it would give you so much more data, and you could create so much value for your customers, because we don't have to save our receipts for 10 years for a microwave oven with 10 years guarantee. So and I imagine that I'm not the only one who has been thinking about this. So my question would
No,
probably
you're
be,
unfortunately not. But if you were, you would have made a lot of money by now. I don't want to disappoint you. I'm very sorry, but I will disappoint you a little bit because 2 years ago I bought the market leader with that technology called Storebox. It's actually inside a mobile. I mean, some of you may have seen it inside a mobile pay, and so we own the market leader in the Nordics for electronic receipts. And of course, that's a hugely valuable business. So what we did, and that's marketing for our ability to work with founders, with startups, because this company basically didn't have any revenues when we bought them. We paid over 100 million for it. And we kept the founders in place. So today the founders own 30%, we own 70%. And we've kept the company separate, and it's on an exponential curve. And if you ever start something up in our industry, and you would like some partners, I think we're good partners, because the people at Storebox, the founders of Storebox, 3 guys, they're also helping us with the development of mobile payments. So they're also helping the core, but just for the fun of it, because they love to do these things. And this is one of our best examples. We have many of them, actually. I bought about 7 or 8 companies of that nature, where we basically leave the founders in place and become partners with them. And so unfortunately, that's already there. That doesn't mean that will be the winner, Storebox. Right? Even though they're market leaders today, the penetration is very low. So if you're fast, I don't know when you finish school, or even now, jump out of school and do it. Because at the end, sorry, no, sorry. Jesus, did I say, I'm on camera as well. No, but I mean, if you can find not only the, but also the commercialization of that in a major way, we'll come and knock on your door and buy that company as well.
So, but we're running out of time, but we need one final question. It has to be a quick answer, and it's about the ownership of the company, because now you're listed and you're being unlisted because you were bought by Friedman and Hillman. Yeah. But the question is, how is it possible to focus on new technologies being listed, because you have to deliver every quarter? Is it better to be unlisted as a technology-driven company? But again, then we have a lot of examples on Google and Facebook and everybody else that are listed. But what is your take on it? Are you happy that you're going to be unlisted because you are in this business?
Well, I have to be respectful to the current shareholders, of course, and some of you, there may be some people in this room also. But I think that, as a public company, you focus on the next quarter. What's the revenue next quarter? What's the cost next quarter? So it becomes very short term. And if you have an industry that is evolving on an exponential curve long term, and you're very short term in your decisions, you're going to fail. So then you can ask, why did we go public? And that was because we had other shareholders who needed to exit. But I'm satisfied that we now get back. By the way, Hillman and Friedman, they're from San Francisco, so they're basically a tech-savvy investor from the Valley. And I'm very happy that we can partner up with them in a private setting, not focusing in on the next 2 quarters of financial performance, but really look to invest to optimize our position in the longer term. Either through development of the company here in the Nordics, where we already are, but also how do we explore our technologies on a global scale? And that's definitely something I'm very excited about. It was unfortunately not possible to do, I think, in a public setting, and we didn't have an easy life as a public company. And that's very, very unfortunate, I think.
But it was a big yes on that question. And unfortunately, we have to end now because the time is up. But please, everybody, let's give a big thank you to Bo. And then...
Thank you.
And we also have a more